Our program this evening is St. Anthony's Orphanage and School. St. Anthony's Orphanage was founded by Father Bonaventure Piscopo. He was the pastor of Immaculate Conception Church in Bloomfield. Father Piscopo raised the funds to purchase 11 acres on the hilltop above Oakmont that belonged to the Keating family. During the 1800s and early 1900s, there was a large migration of Italians to America. Many settled in the big cities, and the mortality rates were high among the poor immigrants. And Father Piscopo saw a need to care for the children who lost one or both of their parents. So Father Piscopo established St. Anthony's Orphanage to care for the orphan children of Italian immigrants. This large house on Halton Road was across the road from the country club, and this was the home of the Keating family. And they had 13 children. And this is the property that Father Piscopo purchased. So given the number of bedrooms and the fact that they had 13 children, it was very easy to convert it to an orphanage. The dedication of the new orphanage was set for July 3rd, 1921. Special guests that day were Bishop Hugh Boyle, the Bishop of the Pittsburgh Diocese, and the Italian ambassador to the United States, Vittorio Rolande Ricci. Over 7,000 people were on hand for the ceremony. A temporary wooden stage was constructed for the 50 dignitaries in attendance. As the bishop and the ambassador rose to speak, the stage collapsed. The crowd surged forward to help. Bishop Boyle crawled from the wreckage and told everyone to stop and step back, as he feared people might get trampled rushing in to help. A group of men lifted the collapsed platform and found that no one was trapped underneath. Luckily, no one was seriously injured in the mishap. The ambassador and the bishop, although shaken, moved to the front steps of the orphanage and continued on with the ceremony. Now, that was not the only accident that occurred that day. Earlier in the morning, a trolley on its way from Pittsburgh, filled with people on their way to the ceremony, jumped the track near Verona and careened into a ditch. But once again, no one was seriously injured in the mishap. The orphanage was placed under the charge of Father Lawrence Scarpaci and the Sisters of the Sacred Heart. And the sisters operated an orphanage up in New Haven, Connecticut. And they sent 5 of the sisters down to St. Anthony's to run the orphanage here. The sisters were given room and board, and they were paid $15 a month. 4 boys were admitted on the first day, and the number quickly rose to 25. Support for the orphanage came from the Diocese of Pittsburgh, along with a number of organizations. The Friends of St. Anthony's Orphanage was founded shortly after it opened. The group provided activities and outings for the children that included parties, picnics, field trips to the zoo, Kennywood, and boat rides on the Allegheny River. In 1925, St. Anthony's announced plan for a major expansion. The cornerstone for the new building was dedicated on August 3rd. The ceremony included an automobile parade from East Liberty, an outdoor mass, band concerts, sporting events, marching drills by the orphans, dinners, and speeches. The event was led by Bishop Boyle. This new building cost $60,000, and it added 30 rooms to the orphanage. And luckily, nothing went wrong. With the completion of the new building, the orphanage was able to accommodate more children, and the number increased from the original 25 to 200 by 1930. And this is the original orphanage. I'm sure anybody who lived in Oakmont remembers this building. On August 25th, 1933, the children were visited by Italy's #1 athlete, heavyweight boxing champion Primo Carnera. Now, does anybody see anything wrong with this picture? They're saluting. This was in the early 30s, before they knew what Mussolini was all about, and they were giving him the salute. But that's the heavyweight boxing champ visiting the orphanage. The orphanage provided schooling for the children, and admittance was opened up to all children, no longer just of Italian heritage. As the Great Depression swept the land, families were met with a new challenge of caring for their children. Many people were out of work and could not provide for their families, so St. Anthony's began to accept depression orphans. And these were children with parents who were unable to support them. They went to live at St. Anthony's, and while there, they were allowed to go home on the weekends and visit their parents, and the parents were encouraged to visit them at the orphanage. When the Depression was over, they returned to their homes. In 1932, a medical center and a dental center were added. In 1935, Father Louis Farina was placed in charge of St. Anthony's. He changed the name of the institution to the St. Anthony's Village. The inspiration was Father Edward Flanagan's Boys Town in Nebraska. The cost of caring for a child at St. Anthony's at the time was 71 cents a day. Father Farina began a fundraising campaign to build a new dormitory at the village. During one of the golf tournaments at the country club, he noticed all of the cars coming up to the course. So he gathered up a bunch of the boys, and they went out and they began to park cars on the property. And he used the money to fund his building fund. And that was a tradition that kept on through the years until St. Anthony's closed. On July 12, 1936, construction began on the new boys' dormitory. It was a single-story cottage-type building that housed 66 children. Father Farina implemented programs on proper nutrition, child care, and athletics. A gymnasium was built in 1934 and a wood shop in 1939. Along with academics, the boys were taught gardening and woodworking skills, while the girls were tutored in domestic services and sewing. Now, the Historical Society did a book a few years ago called Let Me Tell You a Story. It was an oral history of Oakmont. And one of the people that we interviewed was a gentleman by the name of Nevin Woodside. And as a boy, Nevin grew up on 12th Street over near Halton Road. And this is one of his recollections of St. Anthony's. Nevin said, "When I was growing up, St. Anthony Orphanage was still in operation. They had 2 cows, and the cows always got out and would come over and get in my dad's garden and eat his corn. There was a caretaker at the orphanage who would come over with a couple of boys and shoo the cows home. Well, anyway, one of the nuns up there at the home must have been a big band fan, because she would get those kids out there on a warm summer evening and they'd sing. I remember most of the songs were Jimmy Dorsey numbers, and I still remember them singing Amapola and Green Eyes, just like it was Jimmy Dorsey himself." During the Second World War, St. Anthony's saw an increase in the number of children. Just as they took in the Depression orphans during the 1930s, they now accepted war children. These were the children of men who went off to fight in the war, and the mothers either had to work or didn't have the money to support the kids because the father was away fighting in the war. So these children went to live at St. Anthony's. And again, visits were encouraged on the weekends, and the parents were encouraged to come and visit. They lived there. During the war, there was a waiting list. The school was filled to capacity, and there were children waiting to get in. After the war ended, Father Farina continued his expansion of the St. Anthony Village. In 1948, he began construction of a chapel. To keep the costs down, he acquired used building materials when possible. Now, I'm sure you all remember the chapel, and you know it was made of stone. Well, the chapel stone came from the old Pittsburgh Central High School that was located in the Hill District. The school was torn down in 1946, and they acquired the stones, and that's what they used to build the chapel. There were some doors from the old Henry Hotel in downtown Pittsburgh that they were able to acquire when the hotel was torn down, and they were able to get some other building materials from old mansions and houses that were being torn down in Pittsburgh. And this here is a picture of the old Central High School that was located in Pittsburgh. And I don't know if you can tell on the screen, but you can see that it was made of stone, and that's the stone that they used in the chapel. The chapel was built in the shape of a cross, with 4 equal naves extending out from the center altar, made from Italian marble. The floors were Italian terrazzo, installed by John Patrizio of Oakmont. This is the altar of the chapel. It's made from imported Italian marble. The stained glass windows were specially made for the chapel, and they were designed to feature children. And this is from a cover of one of the newsletters, and you can see the stained glass and the children that were in the windows. Sculptor and Oakmont resident Frank Rinaldi crafted the stonework and statues for the chapel. Now, he began in 1948 when they started construction. Mr. Rinaldi was retired. He was 75 years old. And he had 3 of his assistants, Joseph Ciatello, who was 80, Anthony Martinelli, age 73, and Jacob Bracotta, who was age 72. Now, the combined ages of these sculptors was 300 years. They volunteered their time. Unfortunately, Mr. Bracotta suffered a heart attack and died at St. Anthony's while working on the chapel. Mr. Rinaldi worked from pencil sketches that he made to design the stonework and the statues. Now, an interesting story is told by the Rinaldi family that Mr. Rinaldi was up on the St. Anthony property picking wild mushrooms, and he ran into Father Farina, and they began talking about this new chapel. And it was at that point that Mr. Rinaldi volunteered to do all the work for free. And he had his helpers come up and they worked for free. This is a picture of him crafting one of the cornerstones for the chapel. And then you can see there, one of the walls there, that's one of the sculptures that he made. As I said, Father Farina accepted their offer. And this is a picture of the 3 of them on the site. You can see the chapel in the background, and they were referred to as the 3 Musketeers of St. Anthony's. Work on the chapel came to a halt on May 3rd, 1951, during a thunderstorm when lightning struck the industrial building and garage at St. Anthony's. The fire caused $50,000 in damage. It destroyed 4 trucks, carpenter's tools, and building supplies for the chapel. For a time, the fire threatened the boys' dormitory, and the firemen ordered the dorm evacuated. The sisters, priests, and even neighbors helped evacuate the children over to the girls' dorm. And they said that the boys marched out of the dorm single file while the building was burning behind them, but they marched to safety over to the girls' dorm. Funds continued to come in, and the chapel was completed in 1954. The formal dedication took place on November 17, 1954. Prior to that, there were some changes. In 1951, Father Arthur Garvin was appointed director of St. Anthony's Village as it celebrated its 30th anniversary. From a simple farmhouse, the campus expanded to include a girls' dorm, boys' dorm, classrooms, gymnasium, cafeteria, medical and dental center, greenhouse, convent, and a new chapel under construction. There were 21 sisters from the Sacred Heart Order who cared for the children with the assistance of a dentist, a doctor, a nurse, social worker, teachers, and volunteers. St. Anthony's alumni included 2 priests and 10 nuns. There were 110 children living at the orphanage. At this point, the majority of the children were no longer orphans, but rather children of broken homes. Society was changing, and the diocese undertook a 2-year study under Bishop John Dearden to examine how to best utilize the orphanage and meet the needs of a changing society. Bishop Dearden's study revealed that there were 20,000 special needs children living in Allegheny County. Sadly, most were not offered the opportunity of an education or the chance to become a functioning member of society. Too often, they were institutionalized or hidden at home by the families. The study recommended converting the orphanage to a school to provide these children with an opportunity of an education and to learn life skills, enabling them to become functioning members of society. In 1953, the new St. Anthony's School for Exceptional Children opened its doors. It was the first school of its kind in the country. The school originally served students from ages 6 to 12, with the option to stay on until the age of 16. Shortly afterward, the ages were expanded from 5 to 18, with the option to remain enrolled until the age of 21. In 1958, a new school building was completed. It housed 10 classrooms, offices, a clinic, a library, arts and crafts space, and a speech and hearing lab. The curriculum included an elementary, secondary, and vocational training program. There were day students who commuted and resident students who lived in the dorm. During the week, they lived there, but everyone went home on the weekends. By 1962, enrollment included 178 students, of which 112 were residents. Expansion of the campus continued in 1962 with another new building for vocational training, cafeteria, workshop, and gymnasium. Expanded vocational and job training was started in 1963 for the secondary students, and this included domestic services, maintenance, food service, shoe repair, gardening, and landscaping. And I'm sure many of you remember the old St. Anthony's school bus. It traveled all over the county each day, transporting students to and from school and to field trips. Some students were picked up as early as 5:30 a.m. The academic programs included classes in reading, writing, arithmetic, spelling, penmanship, and social studies. The high school curriculum incorporated vocational training along with the regular studies. The students graduated at the age of 18. However, there was an option for them to remain for additional vocational training until the age of 21. Speech and physical therapy were also offered to the students. The foster grandparent program invited senior citizens to mentor and visit with the students during school hours and in the evenings in the dormitories. In addition to academic studies, extracurricular activities were also an important part of St. Anthony's. Each year, the students put on a Christmas show and a spring musical. The St. Anthony's Special Olympics were a huge event each spring, and the school year finished up with a prom and graduation ceremony. Scoutmaster William Scully and Sister Carlene founded Boy Scout Troop 119 at St. Anthony's. The St. Anthony Boy Scout and Girl Scout troops were the first in the country comprised entirely of special needs children. Each Thursday afternoon, the Hair Metric Salon in Oakmont invited the students down for an afternoon of styling and pampering. The owners, Dale and Marge Craddy, partnered with the Pittsburgh Beauty Academy to install a mini salon at the school where the students were trained in hairstyling techniques. And this is a picture of St. Anthony's campus. You can see the original boys' dormitory over there on the right. In the center is the school with the addition out the back. And then over to the side there is the boys' dormitory with the maintenance and garage back here, the convent, and then rectory, and then you see the chapel in the center. And you can see how it was built in the shape of a cross. Now this picture would have been taken above Oakmont Country Club, and that road down in the bottom is Halton Road, and that's Oak Street up there in the back, and you can just see a portion of 13th Street. So that gives you an idea of what the campus encompassed. For 30 years, St. Anthony's School was under the care of Silvio Zucco, the superintendent of operations and maintenance. And it was Mr. Zucco who kept the facility in tip-top shape. And he was a favorite of the students and staff at St. Anthony's. From the very beginning in 1921, St. Anthony's received support from Oakmont, the Pittsburgh area, and the nation as well. As I said before, shortly after the orphanage opened, the St. Anthony's Guild was established by the members of the Pittsburgh Diocese to assist at the facility. They held card parties, fashion shows, and charity galas to raise money for the orphanage. And with the money, they sponsored picnics, parties, and field trips for the children. Here in Oakmont, the Lions Club sponsored Christmas parties, while the Kiwanis sponsored the Special Olympics. The Garden Club and Women's Club, along with local school districts, volunteered at the school. The 46 councils of the Knights of Columbus in Pittsburgh designated St. Anthony's as their primary charity. They raised money and supported the village through the years, including a Christmas seal program and what they called their penny drive in the churches of the diocese. And this is one of the seals from 1962-63 that was printed up, and they used on postage and things like that. The Pittsburgh Pirates and Steelers were supporters. Here's a picture of Willie Stargell visiting the school, and also Rocky Blyer. The Pirates' wives held luncheons to support the school, and golf outings were held at the Oakmont Country Club. I found an article that talked about Steelers Ernie Holmes and J.T. Thomas, and it said that they visited the school in 1974, and they were brought to tears by a song about the Steelers that was performed by the elementary students. Support also came from businesses, both large and small. When they built the chapel, the Austin Graves Construction Company hauled all of the stone from the old school in Pittsburgh out to Oakmont free of charge. H.J. Hines assisted with nutritional programs. Corporate foundations such as the Richard King Mellon, Howard Hines Foundation, and the Sarah Mellon Scaife Foundation supported the school. But it wasn't always large corporations that supported St. Anthony's. There was a gentleman here in Oakmont by the name of Tony Kuda who opened a one-room store in his house. And for 20 years, each summer he would go to the Strip District, fill his truck with watermelons, and take them out to the school and have a watermelon party for the kids at St. Anthony's. And I even thought it was interesting, Pittsburgh Brewery even got involved. They donated 50 cents for every case of Old Frothing Slosh beer they sold during the holiday season. On November 14th, 1959, Robert Kennedy visited the school and donated $50,000 to St. Anthony's in memory of his brother Joseph, who died during World War II. At the presentation, Kennedy said, "We think St. Anthony's has one of the most outstanding programs in the country." And this is the newspaper picture that was taken, and it's Kennedy along with Bishop John McDowell at the school. On March 10th, 1958, a large envelope arrived at the school, and it was simply addressed as St. Anthony's Orphanage, Oakmont, PA. Well, Father Garbin opened it to find it stuffed with damp, soiled, decomposing $20 bills. So he consulted a lawyer, and the lawyer told him to send the money to the U.S. Treasury, which he did. Well, it took 6 months, but the Treasury processed and sorted the bills. They then sent a check to the school in the amount of $10,970, which was in the envelope. And to this day, no one knows who sent the money. But they think wherever it came from, it was buried underground because of the condition of the money. Another interesting story of community support occurred in 1961 when the Project 660 was initiated by the Parent Teachers Guild at the school. At the time, the sisters were in need of a new car. So the Guild began a drive to collect 660 top value stamp books to redeem for a new station wagon. Within 6 months, the books were collected from people all over Pittsburgh, and the nuns received a brand new 1962 Ford Falcon station wagon. Now, it must be noted that they collected an additional 54 books so the nuns could have an automatic transmission in their station wagon. And here it is. I found the old catalog, and there's the Ford Falcon, and you can see there are 660 books, and if you want the automatic transmission, it's $725. There were many benefactors and people who donated to St. Anthony's because it did hold a special place in everyone's heart. But probably the largest benefactor of St. Anthony's was a man that many people knew, but they never knew of his gifts, his generosity, good deeds, or his life story. and that was the founder of St. Anthony's, Father Bonaventure Piscopo. No, he was referred to as Father Bonaventure. Father Bonaventure was born in Naples, Italy in 1859. His father was the Count Galassi Piscopo. The Piscopo family was considered Italian nobility. They were wealthy landowners and merchants, and their wealth and power dated back to the 16th century. Father Piscopo gave up his royal lifestyle at the age of 20 to become a priest. He came to America in 1895 to serve the growing Italian immigrant population in America. One of the first things he did when he arrived is he helped establish the Church of the Most Precious Blood in New York's Little Italy. And he was an advocate for the immigrants' rights and worked tirelessly to help families of the immigrant community. After 5 years in New York City, he came to Pittsburgh and he served at the Immaculate Conception Church in Bloomfield, which was also an Italian neighborhood. When he died on March 18, 1934, he left 3 17th century paintings by the famous Italian Renaissance painter Giovanni Barberi, a set of antique silver engraved with the Piscopo coat of arms, and a rare antique first edition book collection dating back to the 1600s. He also left $1,000 for a wood shop to be built at the orphanage. It was also learned at the time that it was Father Piscopo who donated the $25,000 to buy the original St. Anthony's property. And he did all this, and I've done a lot of research on Father Piscopo, and it would make for a program in itself. I mean, he was just a very interesting person, and the things that he did for people in New York and then when he came here to Pittsburgh. So all that came to the orphanage in 1934. And of course, the members of the Pittsburgh Diocese have always supported St. Anthony's. By the late 1980s, the thinking on special needs children began to change, and it was once again time for St. Anthony's to refocus its mission. It was determined that special needs children should no longer be separated, but should be mainstreamed into the school systems. In 1987, St. Anthony's established a satellite program at St. Thomas More School in Bethel Park. In 1992, St. Anthony's School for Exceptional Children became the St. Anthony School Program. The program was mainstreamed out to 9 schools and 2 high schools in the Pittsburgh Diocese. The focus was to serve children between the ages of 5 and 21 with Down syndrome, autism, and intellectual disabilities. With this change, a decision was made to close the facility in Oakmont. And on October 6, 1993, the St. Anthony Village was put up for sale. The property was sold, and all of the buildings were demolished. The stained glass windows from the chapel were preserved. They were later used in a new church at Saints John and Paul Parish in Wexford. Portions of the marble were saved and installed in the entryway here at the library. I don't know if you noticed that when you came in, but that's the marble from St. Anthony's Chapel up in the entryway. Some of the pews were purchased by the Borough of Verona, and they use them in their council chambers today. Today, the campus is home to the Summit neighborhood in Oakmont. The small orphanage that Father Piscopo started in an old farmhouse on the hilltop in Oakmont for 25 unfortunate orphans has touched the lives of countless people through the years. The lives of priests, nuns, teachers, volunteers, parents, the community, the Catholic Church, but most importantly, the students of St. Anthony's have been enriched by Father Piscopo's vision nearly 100 years ago. Now, we just received news yesterday that Sister Estelle Jean Murphy, the principal at St. Anthony's for 25 years, passed away recently at her home in Kansas. And she was well liked and well respected by both the staff and the students at St. Anthony's. So I think it would be nice if we dedicated tonight's program to Sister Estelle. I think, as I researched St. Anthony's, the thing that just recurring theme was just how much people were attached to the place. I mean, not only here in Oakmont, but the whole Pittsburgh area and even across the country. St. Anthony's really held a special place in everybody's heart, and we were really fortunate that we had it here for so many years, and it was a part of our Oakmont community. So thank you very much.